Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. We're going to go ahead and get started. If you have not signed in, please do so now. At this time, we're going to have Miss Cindy Lassiter of St. John Baptist Church come and open up our meeting with prayer. And we have technology in the working. Are you ready? Ready.
Good afternoon, everyone. When I was thinking about the great work of this organization, I was looking for a scripture that fit. There was a lot of scriptures that fit, but I chose Matthew 25:35. And it reads, "For when I was hungry, you fed me. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in." Very suitable for this organization. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we come before you with hearts full of gratitude for this gathering of your people. As we begin this time of service, preparation, and fellowship, we invite your presence to dwell among us, guide our words and actions, so that everything we do in the upcoming months glorifies you and furthers your mission in our community. Lord, you are the source of all compassion and love. Help us to reflect your grace in the way we serve and care for those around us, especially the vulnerable and those in need. Strengthen our hands and hearts as we seek to be instruments of your peace and mercy. Let this mission be a light to those who walk in darkness and a beacon of hope for those who feel lost or abandoned. Bless each person here, and may this gathering be a time of renewal, inspiration, and unity as we work together to fulfill your calling. We offer this prayer in the name of Jesus Christ, our Savior and Redeemer. Amen.
Thank you, Cindy. So welcome everyone who's also watching on Zoom. At this time, we are not going to have any questions. We're going to try to get through this so that we can get through it so people can get home so they can see the game. I've been informed several times that the game is not being delayed because of a traffic accident. So I will do everything I can, okay? So anyway, the first thing I'd like to do before we get started is I would like, I'm going to go our mission statements now. I would like all of our shelter managers and Will Marie to please come up on stage. So as you can see, our mission statement, we are serving those who are experiencing homelessness throughout the greater Williamsburg area. At this time, would my shelter managers please come up? All of my shelter managers. Walking a long green mile. They look like they're good and ready to be sentenced. 5 months. So anyway, if you notice, you think, wow, wait a minute, there's a lot more shelter managers than normal. So that is because we have, and it's going to be in the presentation, but we now have shelter managers from the time we open the door until the time we close it every day. There will be staff on board. So we will always have staff. See, you're welcome. See, you guys are welcomed. You didn't know how much you wanted. So anyway, so this is LaShawn. This is Lily. Lily actually was our overnight a couple years ago. She decided to have an accident, and she didn't have anything better to do, so she wound up in the hospital with a messed up leg. But now she's ready. She's all ready to dance, and she's ready to come back and work for us. Then we have Beth, who has been a volunteer with us, and so she's ready. She knew what she was getting into. Then we have Tony, who also did the same thing. Then we have Alba, who also did the same thing. And then we have Rodelson. He also goes by Gene. And he has decided that he wanted to just jump in here and find out what it's all about. So, and then of course, you know, my right hand person who don't know what I'd do without, and that's Miss Will Marie. So if you would just welcome them on board. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. We're done. Yes, you're done. Okay, so at this time, I'd like to turn this over to Will Marie. She's going to go over a few things.
Hi, it's so exciting to see so many smiling faces again. Um, Thank you for being here. I'm ready for the next slide. The question that everyone asks always, why all the rules? The answer is simple: safety. Guests cannot go out to their vehicles outside once checked in. Why? Safety. Guests cannot go into their belongings for any reason once they are checked in because of safety. We do not give individual guests gifts, rights, or personal information ever because of safety. No electronics after 10. Believe me, it's a safety situation. You want to keep the peace. I know this is a controversial one, and it's one that I just want to expand a tiny bit because we hear a lot of, but what does it matter if someone have headphones and and they're just under their blanket watching a movie? Well, how many times you've had some kind of headphones and are watching a very funny movie and start laughing out loud or start singing out of, automatic reflex or whatever you want to call it. And we have people sleeping that need their sleep. They really need that sleep. So that is why the very strict no electronics rule after 10. Um, we do not give out extra linens or emergency clothing. We have very limited quantities. There are times that we might have guests that, need the extra linen because they're cold. Well, what if the other 25 need also extra linen? We don't have enough to provide for everyone. We have enough to cover the shifts. And check-in procedures, setup procedures, etc. Consistency. So when we go way above and beyond in one place, it creates a consistency issue with the next church. Because then our guests are expecting whatever it was from that week to repeat again on the next week. I'm ready for next. So, generally speaking, important information that you should know. Everyone should be signing a confidentiality agreement. You do not have to print it. You do not have to bring your own copy. We have a copy. You can sign it when you arrive at the shelter. Just make sure you sign it. You only have to sign it once. And that includes the back of the page. For safety, you only use your first name on your tag. That we ask the pastors, we ask everyone, just first name. Please be on time. We are counting on you to be able to run the shelter. Some of you have been there when we have a skeleton crew. It is very difficult to run everything when we don't have everyone there. If you cannot make it, contact your key leader. Your key leader should know they may have available people on call to cover for your shift. And please do not share any guest information with anyone outside the shelter. There are specific protocols for sharing information with the police, and you should always, when in doubt, ask a shelter manager or refer back to your training manual. That information is also available to you. Next. So another policy that there's always a lot of questions is about youth at the shelter. Again, we go back to safety. We are an emergency winter shelter. We meet at churches. This is not a hotel. This is not a place with rooms. This is not a place where we are separated necessarily properly. There's not a lot of privacy there. We're trying to keep everyone safe. So, no youth under 14 are allowed in the shelter while guests are present. There's no exceptions to this. Youth under 16 are allowed at the shelter only when serving meals, and they have to remain behind a table or counter in the kitchen while the guests are present. They are not allowed to be going around the tables serving or talking to the guests. Youth 16 and 17 are allowed to help at the check-in table and with meals, as long as the parent or guardian is with them the entire time. So basically, this is only shift 1 and shift 3. No minors should be at the shelter at all during the overnight shifts. Next. So I know that all of you like the presence of the police officers during the evening shifts. This have been a great partnership with COFM. Why we have them there? It assists during opening times at the shelter. When we open the shelter, our guests know the police is there. Our volunteers know the police is there. But they are there in a non-threatening way with civilian clothing, just showing their badge. They're not hiding who they are. They're just one more person there being, observing all the operations of the shelter and making sure that everything stays under control. So they assist with the overall security of the shelter. Off-duty officers are on site from 6 to 9 typically. Sometimes it may be 5:30 to 8:30, but typically will be 6 to 9. Please do not ask the police officer, hey, do you know this guy coming in? What's his story? They are not supposed to be sharing any of that with anyone. The same thing, you should not be going to them to tell them what you just saw. If you have a concern about a guest, who should we go to first? The shelter manager. The shelter manager can make the determination if we need to get the police involved. Bathroom use. There's a lot of confusion with this rule. The general rule is that we would prefer to have only one person in the bathroom at a time for each guest's safety. However, during check-in or early in the morning, if someone is using the restroom and someone really can't wait, we can knock in the bathroom, ask if that person is okay with someone else going in. And if the other person feels comfortable and say yes, then we allow a second person to go in. But this is only during check-in hours and early morning hours, not in the middle of the night. Again, safety. Middle of the night, we're under a skeleton crew, basically. So there's a lot less oversight to avoid any situations to happen. If the bathroom has a shower in it, that means that only the person taking a shower can be in the bathroom. The other thing is we do get the board members that visit the shelter throughout the week. They are welcome. They are encouraged to come throughout the week. We had asked them to wear their T-shirts or their name tags. Sometimes both. They should be using both, but things happen. They should always identify themselves with the shelter managers, and they will work very hard on not coming to the shelter on Sundays. Sundays are busy the way they are. We are trying to set up. The guests are trying to get established into a new location, so they will work very hard to not come in on Sundays. Okay, so due to multiple misunderstandings in the past, moving forward, anyone at the door is considered a guest. So when I go and say, Miss Kathy, sorry, I'm picking on you here. Miss Kathy, I'm sorry you're here to stay the night. Miss Kathy's not going to get mad at me because I'm asking her. She knows that I don't know. I mean, I call her Miss Kathy, so I shouldn't have. I'm saying ma'am or sir, but I am assuming she's a guest until she informs me, no, I am, you know, a volunteer. I'm cooking dinner. Or even a shelter manager may be coming, although each shelter manager they know each other, but let's say a volunteer is the one at the door when as the middle of the night shelter manager comes. He may have or she may have the coat on. Don't ever assume that person, you can ask, are you here staying the night or are you, what's your role in the shelter? Please announce to the security volunteer or shelter manager announce that you're there to volunteer or relieve someone. Next. Okay. Now, okay. Continue. Let's see. Prepping for the shelter. This is, you might remember me if you're have worked on setting up at a church, you may have seen me. You may not see me as much this year because you know what to do. This is how the trailer looks like when it gets to your church. Everything in the trailer have a place. You're only unloading the bins assigned to your particular week. We have a color-coded system. One week is pink and the other week is green. If you are told that your week is green, only the green bins should be the ones inside your building. That avoids any confusion of any volunteer, someone that have not read the manual or someone that just was added at the last minute to dig into next week's supplies. All the air purifiers, all the bins that don't have a color, the giant blue electronic cards, all of that needs to come out every Sunday. The church is expected to prepare 25 bedding bags. And it is 25 because that is the capacity for one given night at any given site. So you want that first night to have 25 bags because you might end up with 25 people. You want to lay out the mats if the site allows it. There are churches that use their sanctuary also as the sleeping area and as the dining area. So that's not always feasible. But if it is, we want to have those mats set, spaced out, and ready. So that way when the shelter opens up that night, it's all taken care of. Also, when the shelter manager comes in, the shelter manager may need to switch things around. Ask the shelter manager, is there something I can do to help make this easier? Or, it doesn't matter what it is. Sometimes it could be that internet is not working, so the manager is trying to get the computers running. They may be behind on something else because of the computers. See how you can be helpful so the shelter can run smooth. And if the church needs help also with set up the dining and food preparation area, if you don't have a job assigned, you're always welcome to ask the kitchen, hey, I have a few minutes, or we haven't started checking. Is there something we can do to help with the setup process?
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move into shifts. We're going to get into the weeds now instead of general. So next, please. All right, so here's the new thing, okay? All of you techie people, anybody who knows how to type on a keyboard that does it at some rate of speed, a little quicker than 2 fingers, they're going to be, the key leader is going to be looking for you because we are requiring you to have someone on site, just like what we did. We're going to require someone, so because we've had a lot of complaints about it, and that's the only way we know how to overcome that is to just have a volunteer there who's just going to be checking in people. So if you're one of those, please let your key leader know so that they can do it. Next, please. Next.
For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, for I was
That's the wrong video. You just play the PowerPoint. It'll do it. I'm not sure what to do with the camera, but just go to the next slide.
for I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you
Yeah, that's not it. Oh, right, I know, but can you play the PowerPoint? So there's on the PowerPoint presentation, the next one was the, okay, well, while he's looking for it, so the shelter managers, I just don't want you to get confused. We have our shifts, you have your shifts, okay? Our shelter managers, as you can see, their times, your shifts are still going to be the same, the 5:30 to 9, the 9 to 1, or 1 to 5:30, the 5:30 to 7:30. Okay, so that's going to be the same, but we have it intentional for the shelter managers so that there's some crossover in case some information needs to be given. Next. All right, this is for the meal people who are doing the meals. Please, we had a little confusion over before about temperature checks and things. What it is food, people who prepare meals get there a lot of times before the other volunteers. So when you're doing that, if someone in your group appears to be feeling ill, the security person is probably not going to be there to check on them. So if you're feeling ill, please don't come to the shelter. And so if you're the key leader, or I'm sorry, if you're the food key leader, and you notice somebody's not feeling well, just send them home. And then also we want to continue with the no self-serve. If you want to offer coffee, please don't just leave it there for everybody to come and do it. Go ahead and pour that for them and let them, and then try to have the single packets of the sugars and creamers. And if you can't, have a volunteer so that there's not a lot of cross-contamination, so that there's not 10,000 people picking up that same spoon, okay? And so also, please remember that we have people who work late, and we also have people that come in all throughout the night. So when you finish up, you always want to set aside a couple of meals. Always run and check with the shelter manager. Just say, by the way, do we have any late workers or anything like that? Because we may have 5 late workers. So you always want to check with them. Next. Oh, next. You got the video? Yay! Okay, he's going to go. This is a 6-minute video. You guys are proud of me. In 3 minutes, I got all that knocked out. So I'm trying to keep up with that World Series thing. Okay, go ahead. No, you don't have it? Yeah, you can't hit play? Okay, you can hit play when we're doing the PowerPoint, so I don't know. Okay. It's down on the bottom of the slide.
Welcome to the community of faith.
Okay, all right. So, okay, you can go into we can go on to the next slide then. All right. And so this one is with the check-in. This is the 5:30 to 9 p.m. And as we'd said before, you don't want to assume everybody's at this one. We had originally said don't assume, so just forget that. I forgot to edit that out. But also, when the shelter manager is there, please, thank you for coming to training, because it helps the shelter managers immensely. Because when you don't come and people don't watch the training, or they don't read the guidelines, and they come in, then the shelter managers spend 20 minutes to a half hour training people just for that night. So everything that you can bring that you have knowledge, it shortens that, and then that way you get to interact with guests longer, and it's just better. We also, when you're set up, there's going to be different things that the shelter manager is going to go over. One of them is a sign up for the YMCA or for that site. Okay, and so you want to make sure you sign those up. You signed it up properly. That and it goes to a volunteer who's going to pick up that sheet. They're also going to be picking up a bag with clean towels. They're going to take that to the YMCA. So it's important to have that sheet for them because they need to know who's coming. Um, and then also on Sundays, we used to just give everybody a new toiletry kit. Everybody new toiletry kit. Well, then you'd see 7 bars of soap, 14 things of toothpaste. So now what we're doing is just saying, hey, do you need anything specific or do you want a whole kit? So if you're doing the check-in, please be aware that they may not always get a whole bag. They may be able to just get some other items. That doesn't mean they're going to go shopping. Okay, please don't say, oh no, I want, Irish Spring. Is it just, they just get a bar soap. Next. Okay, and so if you're familiar for the last couple of years with COVID, but it's worked out really well, so we continue it. We will continue fogging every morning. Our shelter managers were, or if some of the volunteers who like the Ghostbuster feel, they want to fog. A lot of people have fun with it. But if not, but one thing we do is when we can leave the mats laid out. Some churches, as Marie said earlier, we cannot. But if we can, we put a piece of blue painter's tape at the bottom of that mat with their number and their first name. That's where they'll stay if they come back every night. If they skip a night, nobody sleeps on that mat. Okay, we leave it, and then because we fog it each morning, so that way it gets 2 foggings before the next person. It's just an extra safety thing. Now, we may, because I've heard lots of talk that there's the increase in amount of assistance that's being requested. That doesn't always translate to more people at the shelter, but I have heard that there has been an uptick all summer. So we may have an uptick, so we may not be able to do that if they don't show up that night. But anyway, the whole idea is to have the same person on that mat for the week. So if they're germy, they're keeping them to themselves. The other thing that we want to make sure you do, if you are the 5 to 9, the shift 1, is when they're finished, go through the tables, and we have cleaner, paper towels, we have gloves, we have masks. So just spray that down and wipe it down. Help out the shelter manager with that. Next. Okay, as I was sharing with the showers, I've already shared that with you. Anybody here did chaperone for showers before? Anybody? Okay, great, great. So the really important thing I'm going to share with you, and as key leaders who are here, please, if you do the showers at the Y, I need a report at the end. Even if it's nothing but a quick text, my number is on the sheet, and you say no issues. But if you have 10 people on the sheet and 2 showed up, I need to know who didn't show up. It'll have their number. You don't need to give me their name, just their number, and just say, number 12, 7, 22, and 14 did not show. No issues. That's all I need. It doesn't have to be lengthy. If there's an issue, I would like you to call me because this is a privilege we have, and we don't want to lose that privilege. We almost lost it 2 years ago. I meet with them every year to make sure we're still in good graces, and we still are, so I'd like to keep it that way. And that's what the shower sign up looks like. And if you notice, it says M and an F because we don't want any more than 2 males and 2 females in their shower respectively at a time. We only give them 15 minutes so that they're in and out. It has 20 minutes because the 5 minutes to get in there and get out. The last shower is at 8:40. We cannot have them past that. When you're working check-in and you ask them about a shower, the shelter managers are going to look at the bus schedule and they're going to plan it accordingly. Now, we do have guests that drive. So they may say, hey, I got to be at work at 7, so I want to be there, at 6:30. So you're going to make sure you write that down. But the last thing we want to do is write somebody down for 7, and they can't get there till 8 o'clock because of the bus. And then you have a volunteer sitting there twiddling their thumbs for an hour. We really love the volunteers. We do respect you, so we want to make sure that we respect your time also. Next. Okay, this is funny. So we've been doing it for a couple years, so hopefully it's no problems now, but we've had people go to the wrong place for the laundry, okay, or forget it completely. But it is the Merrimack Center, which is the Youth Detention Center. It is not the jail. So when you're driving down on 143 and you see that jail to the left, when you go to turn into the jail, Immediately look to the left and you'll see Merrimack Center down at, you just drive down a little access road. They actually, I'm supposed to meet with them and we're going to be, he's going to tour me around to see everything, but it's a great big garage door. Just ring the bell and out of nowhere somebody says, "Can I help you?" And so then they open the door, you don't see anybody, you drop it off, then you leave, they close the door. When you go to pick it up, they open the door, you pick it up, it's just a mystery thing. Um, so anyway, so next, overnight volunteers. Okay, since we have a shelter manager, if you can only have one, that's okay. We prefer two, just in case because the shelter manager is going to be doing a lot of data entry. They're doing a lot of work on the computer and they're not playing games. They better not be. So, but they're going to be doing a lot of entry work. So if you had more than one, it's going to be helpful because then you're going to be the eyes and ears of everything overnight. And so you circulate every 15 minutes. I know you might think, really? Yes, we've had guests get up and take people's property or mess around and do things. And because people thought, oh, it's night, they're sleeping, but they're not. So it's just important just to walk through. And then when the guests know, hey, there's always somebody walking through, it just deters some mischief. All right. And as Will Marie said, we can't stress it enough. I have had more fights and more issues with middle of the night electronics. I actually, that was part of the reasons why I got hired as a shelter manager because I went in the middle of a fight in the middle of the night because, there's people just get irritated with that phone ringing and things like that. So it is something you just have to be adamant. If you're thinking, I saw them on the phone, you don't want to be the bad guy. That's what the shelter manager's for. Let them be the bad guy. Okay. Um, and then also the other thing is when you're working and you're working either a Thursday, Friday, or Saturday, there's a good chance that we're going to be asking you to be folding the laundry that came in. Please put it in the correct bin. The bin is not the bin you're working out of. It's the bin that's going to go to the next shelter. Because if you put it in your bin, guess what? The next shelter doesn't have any clean laundry. So you make sure you're using the correct bin. If you don't know, ask the shelter manager. That's what they're there for. And then, of course, you want to, if it's available, you make coffee. I don't know a thing about coffee. I don't drink it. So whatever you guys do, you do. Next. That's the inventory sheet. When you're doing that laundry, that needs to be in there. If it isn't, ask the shelter manager. They have blank copies. Make sure it gets put in there. We go by that because when you're finished for the week, you're going to write that you have 3 sheets left of this, 4 blankets. Then the next person's going to say, oh, then in order to make it 40, I need 36 of them. So if they're short, guess what? Then we know right away I need to get a phone call. Okay. Let's see. Did you ever get that video loaded? Okay. So do you think we can play it real quick, or I can go through a couple more. Let me just do these. I only have 2 more, and then we can do that. All right. So breakfast time. Make sure you're there. I don't care if you do donuts. I don't care if you do a great big meal. You do what you do. You do what works for you. Just make sure you're there so that you can start serving breakfast by 6. That's the main thing. And please don't just think you're going to feed the guests just because they feel like it. They have to make sure their bedding is all put away because they eat, then somebody's forgotten about the bedding. Well, nothing personal, but I don't want to undo their bedding and put it away. Okay, now if you want to, that's it, but I don't want to. So make sure they put their bedding bag away. Make sure everything's cleaned up. Lunches are either going to be made in the morning or they're going to be made overnight. I don't care which one you choose to do. Just do one or the other so that they have a lunch when they walk out the door. We have one church that literally puts a lunch bag, baggies of meat, baggies of cheese, baggies of bread, and then a snack basket. And they let the guests make up their own lunch and then walk out. So, you can do it that, or you can take, some of churches take orders, whatever works for you. Already, and then the checkout, like I said, the bedding bags. You want to wipe down anything you thought somebody might have touched. Just wipe it down. Help out the shelter manager so that when they're fogging, they don't have to worry about all the little handles and everything else. The rolling cart and everything. Just make sure that the shelter manager, see if they need any help. They may have left a binder sitting somewhere, and then you see it. Make sure you help them put everything away. All right. And then next, I think I'm done. Oh yeah, end of the week. This is really important. If you're here on Sunday morning, if you're one of the overnight or you're the, I'm sorry, the checkout people, you may be asked to help load the trailer. Okay. If you can't, if you physically can't do that, just let them know. But if you can, that diagram, this manual is in the layout is inside the trailer. It's also in the rolling bin. Make sure you look at it. It's really important that you put them away because that thing is like what do you call? I can't remember. Tetris. Every piece has to go inside each other. Okay, if you have the video now, I think that was it for me. So if you can play the video, it's a 6-minute video, and I did my whole presentation in 15 minutes. Aren't you proud of me? So if he has
Community of Faith Mission Check-in Training video. During this video, you will be shown the process of checking in a guest on a typical shelter evening. Prior to volunteering at the shelter, all volunteers should review the general guidelines and important information document. This is of paramount importance for consistency throughout the shelter program. When volunteers arrive at the shelter, they will go to the designated volunteer sign-in area. Once there, volunteers will log on the computer and include the time in and out. If additional hours are worked during a particular shelter evening, please sign in again and add those hours. If it is your first time volunteering for the season, please sign the Community of Faith Mission Confidentiality Agreement. It is not necessary to sign it every time you come to the shelter. There can be more than one signature on the page. The volunteer will then write their first name only on the name tag and put it on. The volunteer will then either go to their station or see the shelter manager for further instructions. Guests begin arriving around 6 p.m. There may or may not be a sitting area. If no sitting area is offered by the host site, the guests will remain outside until the check-in table is ready. The security volunteer will work closely with the shelter manager to ensure all guests are ready for check-in. The security volunteer will greet each guest and offer them a black bag to put their belongings into. Larger items such as rolling suitcases or duffel bags do not have to be bagged. Items that a guest may keep with them will go into the clear plastic tote that was given to the guest during the intake process on their first night at the shelter. The security volunteer will ask each guest to have their shelter ID card in hand, ready to provide to the shelter manager. If the site is offering showers, the security volunteer will offer a small grocery-style plastic bag for the guest to put in one top and one bottom. Undergarments and socks will be provided at the check-in desk. If it is the first of the week, or if it is a first-time guest, the guest will be given a new toiletry kit at the check-in table. If this is the guest's first night, the security volunteer will ask for the guest's identification and will inform the guest of what they can keep and will provide the guest with a baggie prior to the intake process. The security volunteer will give the ID to the shelter manager and state there is a new guest. As the security volunteer is talking to the guests and providing bags, the volunteer will also be observing to see if guests have any possible hidden items inside their socks, under their shirts, etc., in addition to noticing any signs of intoxication. If anything is noticed, the security volunteer will inform the shelter manager, and together, the security volunteer and the shelter manager will approach the guest. If there is an off-duty officer available, the officer will also be there to assess the situation. Once the shelter manager states the check-in has begun, around 6:30 p.m., the security volunteer will have the first guest go to the check-in table and have the next guest come forward and stand ready, on deck. If a guest does not have all the required items inside the black bag, and if the clear tote is not ready for check-in, then security will go to the next guest, who is ready for check-in. There will be 3 people at the check-in table and 1 to 2 roamers. The first person at the check-in table will be the shelter manager. The shelter manager will take the shelter ID from the guest and place it aside for later entry. The shelter manager will enter the guest's number and number of bags in the shelter database. If it is a new guest, the shelter manager will assign a guest number to the new guest, and intake paperwork will be completed after the check-in process is slowed down. Next will be volunteer 1, who will create the bag labels, name tags, and bedding bag tags. The shelter manager will mention the guest's name, guest number, and how many bags the guest has. Volunteer 1 will create a name tag and the bag labels as shown and place them on the opposite side of the table in order to be accessible to the guest. The guest will put on the name tag and tag their own bags. Bedding bag tags will be created each Sunday or the first night of the week for the guest. These tags will be put in a pile next to Volunteer 1, and the tags will be tied to the bedding bags after the initial check-in rush. Volunteer 2 will take shower and lunch sign-ups, and may provide undergarments and socks if available. Each guest will receive a new toiletry kit on Sundays, and each new guest will get a toiletry kit on their first night regardless of the day. Once the guest has labeled their bags and taken a toiletry kit, Roamer 1 will usher the guests with their belongings to the storage area. Volunteers do not touch the guests' belongings. Once bags are stored away, Roamer 1 will then usher the guest to the dining social area. While Volunteer 1 is with a guest, Volunteer 2 will step up to assist the next guest. The dinner shift volunteers arrive at 5 p.m. to begin preparing for the evening meal. Guests will be seated in the designated dining area. Dinner is served at 7 p.m. Depending on the host site, guests will either line up and be served buffet style, or meals will be brought to the tables. Volunteers who are not involved in a shift project are encouraged to sit with the guests to offer conversation. Please note, no personal information about you or your family that would identify where you live or work should be shared. Once meals are done, guests should be encouraged to dispose of their used plates, cups, etc. Bus tickets are distributed beginning at 7:30 a.m. and ending at 8:30 a.m. The shelter manager will review the bus pass procedure with the volunteer prior to distribution. One single bus pass per eligible guest. Guests are allowed to get their bedding bags from 8:15 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. Once a guest retrieves their bedding bag, they are to go to the designated sleeping area. Guests do not have to turn in until 10 p.m., but we encourage them to get their bedding bags and place them on a mat prior to lights out, so they do not disturb the other guests who turned in earlier. Guests will have their guest number and first name written on tape and placed at the foot of the mat on their first night at the shelter for the week. Guests will keep that same spot each night they come back to the shelter. If a guest is not at the shelter for 2 nights, the tape will be removed, so another guest can be assigned that mat. Thank you to James River Baptist Church for allowing us the use of their facilities, and to all the volunteers that helped make this video possible.
Okay, let's do a quick review of general guidelines and important information. That is that packet that was available at check-in. It's also available if you received already access to the training manual. You can print it also. Like we said, all volunteers will use a volunteer laptop to sign in. If your shift extends, let's say you were supposed to be there until 8 o'clock at night, and now you're there until midnight, you will go and sign in again, but this time you sign in from 8 p.m. till midnight. That way we can keep an accurate count of the hours worked. This is very important. We do need to keep track of volunteer hours. Please remember that we are working with a population that, get impressed very easily. Low-cut shirts, tight clothing, mini skirts, mini shorts, and mid-rib tops are not permitted. Leggings are okay as long as the shirt is long. That is for everyone's safety. Volunteers and guests need to be aware that our guests may experience a variety of emotional or physical conditions. Remember to always maintain confidentiality. Do not be discussing our guests with anyone. That includes with people from the same church on a different shift. If the person was not there on a shift, when you found whatever XYZ information, there's no reason for the person for the next day to know that information. Volunteers are not to adopt a guest or a family. Again, safety. You do not know the background of this person. A lot of the times, everything is perfectly fine, but you don't know. Protect yourself, protect your family, and keep them also safe. Um, Volunteers do not assist guests with any personal hygiene or toiletry problems. If there are issues, who do you go to? The shelter manager. The shelter manager will make sure to call Donnie or myself. We'll address the situation. If it's a chronic problem and we need to take more, severe measures and removing the person from the shelter, we'll deal with that at that moment. But no one should be having to help anyone with personal hygiene. Volunteers are encouraged to talk to the guest. Go sit down. If your church is providing dinner also for the volunteers, go and sit down with them and eat right next to them. They do want, a lot of them want to have conversation. A lot of them want to engage with the volunteers. As long as you don't share personal information, you can talk to them. They really welcome it. Please do not give money or gifts to guests. If you're feeling that maybe as a church you guys want to do something more, you will have to do it as a church, not as an individual adopting someone. So medicine. We do have a very small supply of cough medicine, cough drops, Tylenol, and whatnot. Only the shift leader or the shelter manager provide those. Why? Again, safety. We do keep track of any medication that is handed to a guest, because if that person later have a medical emergency, we're gonna have to be able to justify where the Tylenol came from. So please, if you're not sure, ask your shelter manager. Okay, so guests have to put their belongings in black bags. If you have worked with us before, volunteer with us, you have seen this process. There are a few exceptions of stuff that our guests can keep with them. They can keep cell phones, they can keep cigarettes, medicine, books, and the toiletry kit that we provide. And typically this is gonna be, and it should be, in a clear bag. If the guests decide to get rid of the clear bag, please do not go providing another clear bag. Talk to the shelter manager, let the shelter manager make that determination. Do not hand your phone or the shelter phone to any guest. Again, it's for your safety. You don't know who are they calling. If there's an emergency, typically those will go through Donnie and she will notify the shelter manager. And if there's an absolute need for a guest to use a phone, she will work it out along with the shelter manager. But under no circumstance anyone should be using the phone, personal or the shelter phone. And we ask of our guests for them to be considerate of everyone, so no loud talking, music at any time. At the table during dinner, I mean, obviously people are laughing sometimes and having a good time. That's okay. But if it becomes too loud or too disruptive, we need to, help bring the tone a little bit down for everyone's enjoyment. Next. Guests are not allowed in the kitchen. The kitchen closes at 8:30 and no meals after this time. With that said, there's an exception to the rule for people that work, and the shelter manager will communicate with the kitchen of anyone that may be coming a little bit later that night. Smoking is only permitted at the designated time, which is 8 to 8:15. Everyone goes out together for the smoke break and everyone comes back to the building together. Bedding is distributed at 8:15. It's not at 8 and it's not at 8:30. It's an 8:15 and there's reasons for that. We keep the schedule as strict as possible. It eases the situation for the next church, especially because there are churches like we talked earlier where they use the same space that they eat in to then later sleep. So in one church, they can go to bed at 7, and then the other one, they have to wait until the kitchen is finished and cleaned. We want to keep consistency. After the guests have checked in, they are not going out. They're not going out to their car. They're not going out to sit outside the door. They have to stay in. That is part of their contract, their agreement with us. Men and women use separate areas at all times. There is no mingling, even if it's still during lights on. Men, after 8:15, when they go to their sleeping areas, they have to stay either in that area or in whichever common area that church has. They cannot visit each other's sites. If we have a parent with children, they will be separated from the rest of our guests. Sometimes this may look like a line of chairs around the mattresses. So it's not necessarily a visual separation, but more a space. You cannot walk without bumping into a chair. We work based on the location that we're at. In some churches, we may have a Sunday school room that we could use for that family. With that said, only one parent is allowed to stay with the children. It does not have to be just mom or dad. It's one or the other. So when the guest is ready to leave the building, they have to take everything. They have a bike, but they're taking the bus. They have to take the bike. They have a shopping cart, but they're taking the bus. They have to take the cart. Do not keep anything from anyone. We've had situations of someone going to the hospital later in the day and their stuff being, some stuff may be being left at a shelter. We don't want that. We don't want anyone to be responsible for anything from anyone. So please make sure that the guests take all their belongings.
Right, we thank you. Now, what we're going to do now is take any questions. If anyone here is planning on doing security, we ask that you stay back. We have some training that's just specific to security. So please plan on staying. We'll make it as quick as possible. So are there any questions in reference to the presentation? Okay. How do you want to do? I'm trying to remember how they did it. Okay. Go ahead. I'll repeat your question. So I will do it probably about March the 20th of next year. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. So the question was, when will the video and this presentation be available online? And I was being facetious. So the key leader training that just was last week, I was able to upload that by Thursday. So I'm hoping within a couple of days it'll be uploaded. The video is already there. So you can go ahead and watch that. Any other questions? Yes. Oh, the gas leak. You were there then? Yeah. Oh, wasn't that fun? Okay. Okay. Mm-hmm. 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 So is the question in reference to giving rides to people? Okay. Okay, so the question was, in an emergency type situation, are we allowed to give rides to guests? So the reference was, we actually had a gas leak at a church. Everybody was outside. They couldn't get their coats. They couldn't get anything. I literally went back in there knowing I could get blown up and started just throwing the guest bags out so that they could grab their stuff. And so that was an emergency situation. We don't determine that, oh, somebody's hungry and that's going to be an emergency situation. So it would be that was just something we had to do. We thanked everyone for doing it. So that's a different situation. Generally speaking, no rides. Are there any questions on Zoom? Oh, there you are. Okay. Okay, question is, will any hotels be used? We are still trying to get our host sites back up to 18. We do not want to lower how many nights we offer to guests. So we are still doing 18 weeks, but we only have 16 host sites. So we are doing 2 of the weeks in hotels. When you see our shelter schedule, which is available online, and you'll be seeing it around, our website is COFM.info. So if you go on there, you'll be able to see our shelter, our schedule. You're also going to be able to get all this training, reach out to your key leader. And if you're in our volunteer pool, just reach out to us. We'll help you with logging in because you do have to log in to be able to watch the videos and get the training. But we have 2 of our traditional partners and host sites that cannot host right now. They are helping us with part of the week, but COFM themselves are going to have to find volunteers for the other part of each of those weeks. Any other questions? Okay. Any other questions in the audience? Yes. Okay, the question was that we have 25 beds. What happens if the 26th person shows up? So we pick the volunteer that bothered us the most and we send their address. So what we do is we have what we call an overcapacity protocol. And so when we hit that, it depends on the situation of what we'll do. It'll be either we will either send that person to a hotel. But what happens is when we do start getting close to that number, okay, to back up a bit, COFM lets anybody who needs a place to stay that's homeless stay. But we don't care where they are. But during the intake process, when we find out where they're from, they have to sign a form that states that they understand if they're not from around the greater Williamsburg area, they may be asked to go back to wherever area they're from to get the shelter there. A lot of people like Williamsburg because we serve better food and it's not as big of a shelter, so they feel a little safer. So anyway, so we do that. So when we start hitting 18, 21, we start reaching out to those people and say, hey, you may want to go back because we're getting at capacity. If we have everybody from our area, we hit 26, then we go into the overcapacity, which is where we will send them to a hotel. If it's a guest who intentionally comes in late just to make sure they get that hotel, we will get somebody else who's been a very well-behaved guest and give them the hotel and then do that. So we do that. Thank you. That's a good question. Anyone else? Going once? Going twice? Okay, so we thank you. Is there anybody staying for the security training? Okay, great. So if you guys don't mind, and girls, so my shelter managers, if you can help get people, if they want to chit chat or anything, if you can go out into the lobby, anybody who's here for security, if you can kind of move forward, and then we'll go ahead and try to do it so that we can be wrapped up by 8 as we shared. Thank you.